Let's see if this is better. There we go. That makes sense now. Okay. Well, why don't we take this back to the acknowledgement and we'll move it to there. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe peoples. We wish to recognize the long history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and show our respect to them today. We recognize their stewardship of the land. May we all live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after the meeting as an archived video. To those viewing this meeting via the YouTube channel, a warm welcome to you. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances when deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and/or unacceptable behavior and/or comments. Thank you. At this time, I invite your decorum over the course of the coming meeting. All members of council are accounted for at the table tonight. Let us move to item 2.1 of our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those unfamiliar with our council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the council table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol, at this time I invite all councillors with a perceived pecuniary interest, including those who have already declared in writing, to verbally advise the chair in public session and to submit documentation to this effect in writing to the clerk. Councillors are further reminded that should a potential conflict arise during the meeting, they may so declare and act at any point in the meeting. We did not receive, to my knowledge, any advanced notifications of this. Colleagues, any of you wishing to declare a conflict on any item tonight, financial interest? Seeing none, that means we can move forward. All participants are invited to speak when called upon by yours truly, serving as the chair. Those participating remotely, if any, who wish to speak may draw the attention of the clerk through our conferencing technologies chat function. Remote participants are asked to generally maintain a mute state in the web conference portion of our meeting until I recognize your right to the floor. If when I do so recognize I don't hear you because you are muted or having some technical difficulty, I will advise. Let us now focus on the people's business. I invite those in the chamber to silence and put away their phones. Regarding item 2.2 of our agenda, I have a motion before me for the adoption of the agenda of tonight's meeting as follows. The agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Norton, thank you, and Councillor Blazak will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. There's always that first moment when we're waiting for eScribe to come on that is a moment of consternation, perhaps. All right. Thank you. Let's move forward then to item 3 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. Consent items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they may warrant council's recognition and or action. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, and individual action may do so. There is but one item on our consent agenda tonight, the minutes of our last council meeting. Councillors, are there any concerns with these minutes? Seeing none, then I have a resolution for consideration as follows. That consent item 3.1 be received for information and the minutes of the January 9th, 2023 regular council meeting be adopted. Councillor Richardson, thank you, will serve as our mover, and Councillor Rothwell as our seconder. Any discussion or debate on the minutes? Any corrections to be noted? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. At this time, it's proposed that we move to agenda item number 4. We have no public meetings for this evening's meeting. Further, we have no delegations that have asked for an audience with council this evening, which means we can pursue agenda item number 5, reports from departments and key staff. Several departments have not brought forward reports for our attention tonight. These include the CAO's department as 5.1 and the Strategic Initiatives Department is 5.2. That means we can kick along to the Corporate Services Department. We have one item there tonight. As item 5.3.1, Council is provided with a report on the recently held municipal and school board elections. I'll call on North Perth Clerk Lindsay Klein to provide an overview of her report to Council. Welcome, Ms. Klein.
Thank you, Mayor Kiesenberg. Through you to members of Council, I am very pleased to present the post-election report for the 2022 municipal and school board election. Overall, I would say that the election was a success and it was administered in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act and its underlying principles. Through the report that's been provided to Council and posted publicly on our website, I tried to provide as much detail as possible regarding the various aspects of the election and everything that went into its planning and preparation. And at this point, there are a couple points that I would like to highlight. So starting off with voting methods, here in North Perth, we use the traditional in-person voting method with paper ballots for the 2022 election. Back in March of this year, Council may recall that you approved the use of vote tabulator machines, which were used to count the ballots and tabulate results. This has been a tried and true voting method used in North Perth for a number of elections now. And I do recognize that we have received feedback from members of the public as well as members of Council regarding potential drawbacks of only offering one type of voting method, that being in-person voting. There are many considerations that must be examined when looking at alternative voting methods like internet voting, telephone voting, vote by mail. These considerations include security, reliability of technology, and cost. So staff will thoroughly investigate alternatives prior to bringing a recommendation forward to Council well in advance of the 2026 election, and will also engage with the community on this matter. In terms of nominations and third-party registrations, North Perth did see an increase from the 2018 election regarding the number of candidates who filed their nomination paperwork. In total, we had 22 nominations filed for offices on Council and the Avon-Maitland District School Board. Nominations for the other school board trustee positions were filed with the clerks designated as the lead for their respective jurisdictions. One candidate withdrew their nomination completely and 2 candidates refiled for a different office, and we did not have any third-party advertisers register for the 2022 election. One of the biggest election issues that has persisted since the previous election in 2018 is the accuracy of the voters list. I'm sure many or all of you are aware it's a big issue, and it was definitely still a challenge this year in 2022, especially in relation to capturing tenant and border information, recent moves, and new property developments. Historically, the municipal voters list has been the responsibility of MPAC, which is the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. And despite efforts of both MPAC and the municipality to encourage voters to confirm that their information is correct and that they are on the voters list prior to election day, the majority of changes to the list, like people updating their information or adding themselves to the list, were made by voters at the poll, which does result in some additional time spent filling out paperwork before being able to cast a ballot. There has been some positive movement with respect to this issue, as various municipal stakeholders have advocated the provincial government to establish a single voters list for both the provincial and municipal elections. Following the enactment of Bill 204, Helping Tenants and Small Business Act 2020, the Municipal Elections Act has been amended to move the responsibility of preparing the preliminary voters list in municipal elections from MPAC to Elections Ontario, beginning in 2024. So it is anticipated that this amendment will significantly improve the quality and accuracy of the voters list for future municipal elections. Just some other quick stats that I want to highlight. In terms of engagement and communication, a variety of tools were used to disseminate election information. including newspaper, social media, radio, tax newsletters, and the mailing of voter notification cards. 2 candidate information sessions were held as a joint effort between the Perth County area municipalities, featuring speakers from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, as well as Fred Dean, an experienced municipal solicitor. In terms of recruitment of election workers, it does take a village to run an election, and it's definitely a team effort, especially when you're using in-person voting across multiple locations. So in total, we did have 32 election worker positions to fill. 16 positions were filled by our municipal employees, with the remainder being filled by external workers from the community. Our staff in our community really stepped up to work, and I am extremely grateful for everyone who offered up their time to help out during the election. With regards to voting days and times, we had 2 advanced voting days on October 12th and October 15th, where anyone in the municipality could cast their vote on either day. A total of 551 ballots were cast during this time. Voting on election day was offered at 3 locations across the municipality, 1 location per ward, as well as at 1 long-term care facility in Listowel, and a total of 2,549 ballots were cast on election day. So overall, voter turnout was 29%, with a total of 3,100 ballots cast, and this is a slight decrease from 2018, which saw an overall voter turnout of just under 31%. In terms of accessibility initiatives leading up to the election, a 2022 municipal election accessibility plan was developed to guide the provision of election-related services to persons with disabilities. This plan was designed to respect the dignity and independence of electors and candidates. The plan was a living document that was updated and improved as best practices and opportunities for improvement were identified. Some of the actions that were taken to identify, remove, and prevent barriers that affect electors and candidates with disabilities over the course of the 2022 election included seeking feedback on the election accessibility plan from the Perth County Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, auditing each voting location, including entrance and egress, parking, interior voting area, washrooms, and signage, ensuring each voting location had a designated greeter on staff to assist with opening doors, answering questions, and assisting with the flow of traffic, providing election information and material in various formats and making it available in alternate formats upon request. Each voting location was equipped with magnifiers, and election officials were able to provide assistance to voters as needed. Electors with disabilities were permitted to be accompanied by a support person or service animal at any voting location, and support persons were required to take an oath of secrecy and confidentiality prior to providing assistance. Advanced voting days and proxy voting were promoted for those electors unable to work on election day. And election workers were required to complete mandatory training on accessibility at voting locations, as well as the ODA, which is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. So looking forward, the next municipal and school board election will be held in October of 2026, which will be here before we know it. And preparations and planning will begin well in advance of this date. Staff will focus on balancing considerations around modernizations that make it easy for voters to cast a ballot, while also balancing community expectations and principles of the Municipal Elections Act. There are a couple projects and timelines that will have an impact on the next municipal election. The first being the ward boundary review. So North Perth retained the services of Watson and Associates in 2021 to complete a council composition and ward boundary review. We did receive quite a bit of feedback from voters in the recent election regarding confusion on ward boundaries, especially the boundary between Listowel and Alma wards in the area southwest of Mitchell Road South and Perth Line 86, where a significant new development has occurred since the previous election. And it's anticipated that this ward boundary review will be completed in 2023 with adequate time for any potential changes to be in effect for the 2026 election. And in terms of voting methods, a bylaw with respect to alternative voting methods must be passed on or before May 1st in the year of the election in accordance with the Municipal Elections Act. So as I mentioned earlier, we will investigate the use of alternative voting methods like internet, telephone voting, vote by mail, well in advance of May 1st, 2026 to ensure that Council has adequate time to consider recommendations and alternatives. So the recommendation in the report before council is to receive the 2022 municipal and school board election, post-election report for information, and with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or take any comments from members of council. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Klein. Colleagues, questions or first comments before we consider the resolution? I can offer general comment that I think the election seemed flawlessly run to me. I did not hear of any dramatic concerns that were raised, and in fact, we saw lots of diligence and friendly faces at the polls on the day of. So I think due congratulations to you on the successful execution of your first election in the driver's seat as the clerk.
Thank you.
And for all the team and the support that they gave us. Anyone else with comments or questions before we consider the resolution? All right. Then as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the 2022 municipal, let me change the camera here, it would be helpful. Try that again. The Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the 2022 municipal and school board election post-election report dated Monday, January 16th, 2023 for information. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Johnston, thank you, and Councillor Anstett will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. We have no reports this evening from the programs department, which is item 5.4. We also have no reports presented from the manager of facilities, and the facilities group is item 5.5. That means we are on to item 5.6, which is reports from the manager of environmental services, the environmental services group. As item 5.6.1, our Manager of Environmental Services, Mr. Mark Hackett, will present to Council about drinking water. All things drinking water is my impression. Welcome, Mr. Hackett.
Thank you, Mayor Kaisenberg and Council. I have Bridget Roth here from Acclaim Environmental. Bridget is a certified environmental professional with ECO Canada, has 25 years of experience in achieving legislative compliance, optimizing and integrating management systems, conducting risk assessments, preparing and improving emergency response plans, planning and executing annual emergency test exercises, carrying out compliance and management system audits, and developing and delivering training related to these areas of expertise. Bridget was here in 2019 and presented this to most of you, as you might remember. We have a couple new councillors here, and I welcome Bridget.
And thank you, Mark, and through you, Mr. Mayor, and all members of council. I'm happy to be here to present on this very important topic. The title of the presentation is interesting. You may have seen it, and if you haven't, you can Google the words Ontario and taking care of your drinking water, and that will bring up the ministry's guide. So the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has prepared a guide for members of municipal councils about their duties under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so for additional information, you could read up on some of your duties as presented by the ministry. This presentation is specific to your municipal drinking water system, and as you are owner representatives of your community's water supply and drinking water system, you have some duties and responsibilities under the statutory standard of care. And so why are we here? We're here to discuss that statutory standard of care. And as members of council and as the owner, you need to understand your personal duty, be informed, so ask questions, get answers, and be vigilant in your role. And it's also a presentation about providing an overview of your drinking water system. And the reason for some of these duties about vigilance is from the Walkerton tragedy of May 2000. We're coming on 23 years. A major outcome of the Walkerton inquiry was that there was identification of failure at all levels, from the decision makers to senior managers to staff. And so this is where this vigilance and these key duties come from. So under the Safe Drinking Water Act, SDWA, Section 19, there is a section on the statutory standard of care where the owner and decision makers shall exercise the level of care, diligence, and skill that a reasonably prudent person would be expected to exercise in a similar situation and act honestly, competently, with integrity, ensuring the protection and safety of the users of the municipal drinking water system, or be guilty of an offense. And so this section under the Safe Drinking Water Act was promulgated in December of 2012. And so if you were found guilty of this offense, this is a provision that is exempt from the municipal act protections that you have as members of council. And so this would be aside from that. The next slide is just speaking to some of the convictions under the Safe Drinking Water Act that have been issued over recent years. Most recently, an example here is August of 21, the Ontario Clean Water Agency was fined $40,000 plus a victim fine surcharge of $10,000 for failing to ensure a qualified person examined test results of the drinking water treatment plant as soon as possible following the receipt of low chlorine alarms. And so there are duties under the Safe Drinking Water Act and regulations under the Safe Drinking Water Act that there's an immediate response and within a reasonable time frame to attend to the sites where there are chlorine alarms. Another example is November 2020, a water treatment operator was fined $30,000 plus a victim fine surcharge of $7,500 for failing to immediately report an adverse drinking water test result to the ministry. And so under the regulations, when you see adverse test results, there's an immediate verbal report forthwith that is required to be made to the ministry's Spills Action Center, as well as to the local medical officer of health. And so that was a failure in doing that. In November 2018, the Ontario Clean Water Agency was fined $20,000 plus a $5,000 victim fine surcharge for allowing an employee to operate without a valid certificate. So their operator certificate had expired. Even though they had applied for renewal, the Ontario Water Wastewater Certification Office had rejected the training hours in that application, and then the certification lapsed. Unfortunately, and this person then worked 200 more days before this came to light. And then in October 2017 was a significant conviction of a drinking water testing lab and owners of that lab that had carried out drinking water tests that they weren't approved to do. It wasn't on their drinking water test listing. And for the ones that they did have approval to carry out, they weren't following the proper procedures. So it was a very significant conviction with fines and also the order of never to operate another drinking water testing lab again. There is a shared responsibility for safe drinking water, and there's a number of agencies in Ontario that have a hand in the safety of drinking water for communities across the province. And so there are a couple of ministries listed there. The Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks is the primary agency that oversees the ministry inspectors and investigators and the Safe Drinking Water Act and all the regulations. The ministry also oversees the Municipal Drinking Water Licensing Program, which came about post-Walkerton to ensure that operating terms and conditions of drinking water systems were clear and confirmed, and that changes to systems were permitted under certain specifications and pre-authorized rules under changes to drinking water systems. Another agency is the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care that oversees all of the public health units across the province, and of course they are responsible for the community health throughout these public health units and oversee public health units, including your Perth District Health Unit. And so if there were any adverse drinking water tests or other observations to report, it's not just the Ministry of the Environment Spills Action Center that's reported to, but also the local medical officer of health. Which is a change from May 2000 when a lab could report adverse test results and not necessarily report to these other agencies as well. Now there are regulatory requirements for that. The drinking water system owner is the municipality itself as represented by council. So the municipality of North Perth and members of council representing the owner is the owner of North Perth's drinking water system. And then the accredited operating authority. So one of the rules for any drinking water system in Ontario is that each system is operated by an accredited operating authority, and that is the municipality of North Perth, the Operations Environmental Services Department. And for an accreditation, you need to meet the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard, which is a management system standard, and also conduct audits every single year, and your accreditation body conducts audits every single year as well. There are duties under the Safe Drinking Water Act, sections 11 to 18, so duties of the owner as well as duties of the accredited operating authority listed here. The owner must ensure that there's always an accredited operating authority operating the drinking water system. And so if you had made decisions on behalf of the community to change who is the accredited operating authority, you'd have to make sure that it's always an accredited operating authority operating your drinking water system. As the owner, you're required to report on any matter required by regulations. So those immediate reports when there are adverse drinking water tests, or if the local medical officer of health would be issuing a water advisory, you'd be required to report to your community on that. There is also an agreement with an accredited operating authority. So if you had, say, a third-party operating authority operating your drinking water system, there would be an agreement that specifies the scope of the drinking water system as well as what the owner is responsible for versus the operating authority. What to do in emergencies and things like that are specified in that agreement. And you can delegate responsibilities to the operating authority in an agreement, but not Section 19. Section 19, that statutory standard of care that owners have that you cannot delegate. It's always your duty to ensure diligence in your responsible decision making. You can rely on experts in good faith. So if you're faced with a challenging situation related to water, you can hire known experts such as consulting firms, engineering firms to help make those risk-based decisions. And the Act doesn't expect that as owner representatives you would become experts in water, but you are allowed to rely on experts in good faith. The accredited operating authority must provide water that meets all the drinking water quality standards. That labs that are used for drinking water tests are accredited, so there's verification there that the labs you're using for drinking water tests are properly accredited and licensed, and that they are eligible to test for the parameters that you require. The operating authority also must operate in accordance with the Safe Drinking Water Act, and then there are regulations within the Safe Drinking Water Act. You maintain your drinking water system in a fit state of repair. You satisfy the requirements of your drinking water system class. So there are 4 classes of water treatment facilities in Ontario, classes 1 to 4, or classes 1 to 4 water supply systems, and based on class 1 to 4 of distribution systems. So I believe your class 2 systems here. And so there are requirements for that class 2 system to ensure operators are at a certain level and higher, and that if they are an overall responsible operator, they have to have that class 2 designation and higher, and some training requirements are affiliated with your drinking water system class. Also, the operating authority must ensure that drinking water system is always operated by certified and trained people as required and supervised by qualified people as well as per the regulations and your approvals. And carrying out sampling, testing, and monitoring requirements are complied with, and that also the operating authority has a duty to report as required. And some of these reports you might already be familiar with. Every February 28th, there's a legislative responsibility to report to the public and to council about annual report details. And then every March 31st, a report called the summary report is presented by that deadline as well. We have an organization chart. So this is also a requirement under the Drinking Water Quality Management Standard, is to describe your organizational structure. Council is indicated in bright blue, who represents the owner. The gold positions represent members of top management, so some of those senior decision makers who also have that statutory standard of care. And then the manager of environmental services is also the quality management system representative, which is a designation under the DWQMS. And the QMS representative ensures that all of the requirements of the quality management system are consistently met, and that all of your procedures and your organization is set up to succeed in achieving everything that you intend, including compliance requirements, providing safe water, and continual improvement. And then the deeper blue roles are part of the operating authority staff. You have a quality management system policy, which includes 3 key commitments. So providing safe water, so ensuring a consistent supply of safe, high-quality drinking water, that you are maintaining and continually improving your quality management system, and that you are complying with all applicable legislation and regulations. You have senior staff who make risk-based decisions in their operating authority duties, and this is a table describing the competency required. So there's a minimum competency column there, and then the actual competency achieved and the years experience for each of your senior decision makers. So manager of operations, minimum competency 5 years, experience in municipal operations, and then 24 years experience in that. Mark, your manager of environmental services, minimum class 2 certificate and 5+ years, and he's got class 3 certificate and 21 years. And then chief operator, minimum class 3 certificate, having a class 3 competency achieved and 22 years experience there. We have another major outcome of the Walkerton inquiry is that you want to have a multi-barrier approach. You want to have so many barriers so that you're preventing a problem or a disaster, or so the more barriers you have, the better it is. That you won't have a failure at one level does not necessarily guarantee a disaster or a consequence like Walkerton, but failure at 2 or more levels could be problematic. And so the multi-barrier approach is just to prevent problems, but it's also represented by various acts and regulations that came together post-Walkerton inquiry. First, you want to ensure that your sources are protected for generations to come and for your community. And then there is the proper treatment based on the source water characteristics you have. And then inspection programs, monitoring, sampling, and testing programs. And you're making sure that your distribution network, so once you've treated the water, you want to make sure that it's of good quality all the way to the consumer's tap. And so there are a number of programs that you carry out within the distribution network to make sure that that water quality is maintained all the way to the furthest reaches in your system, but also to the consumer wherever they are located. One thing I want to describe about the Clean Water Act is recognition post-Walkerton tragedy that watersheds are beyond many municipal boundaries. And so watersheds cross many municipal boundaries, and the decisions that you make in this municipality could potentially adversely affect another community's water supply. And so there's this recognition that, source protection planning was essential, and that you identified vulnerable areas for each community's water supply, and then you have source protection policies that are the municipalities to implement. Their duties to implement the source protection policies. And each area has a risk management official and risk management inspectors that help make sure that source waters will be good for generations to come. And so dovetailing into that, we have source protection planning, and these are some of the representative maps for the wells that you have in your system. And so with the deepest red coloring, you have, that's the highest vulnerability score for that wellhead protection area. And then it looks like these long oblong shapes, and that's just demonstrating how that water supply pulls water in through your community. And so the first job of source protection planning is to identify the sources of water and also the vulnerable areas. And you wanted to identify as well water quality and quantity issues. So it's not just about ensuring that you have the water quality in your water sources, but also the quantity needed for growth and future populations. You identify threats already existing within those source protection areas, and so that you could negotiate risk management plans with those owners of drinking water threats within existing areas, but also that your risk management official for these source protection plans help make decisions on future development and future new activities being located in these vulnerable areas. You establish level of risks, develop procedures or policies to address those significant risks, and then right now you're implementing those policies. The Safe Drinking Water Act has a newer regulation enacted in 2018, and it's about if you were to add a new well source, the source protection plan needs to be approved by the province first, so that we are all on the same page on what those new vulnerable areas are, including that latest well source perhaps, and so that you're not locating anything that's considered a drinking water threat within those areas. Effective treatment considers what the source water characteristics are. So you have groundwater wells of consistent water quality, and the treatment required for groundwater sources is chlorination for disinfection, and an additional treatment where needed, so iron sequestration at wherever that is needed. You have water quality monitoring, so continuous monitoring. Devices are installed at your water supply wells to ensure that that chlorination level is achieved prior to that water going out to your distribution network. You have redundant equipment for major processes. You have provincially certified operators, and products and equipment are well maintained, regularly inspected, and replaced as needed with latest technology. Your distribution system, so from water supply and treatment sites, you want to make sure, again, that that water quality is maintained all throughout your distribution system. And so some goals of your distribution system is effective design and build, where you're always meeting your maximum daily use for residential and industrial, commercial, and institutional customers. You always have a minimum firefighting demand level, always maintained. For listable system, you have hydrants and operational redundancies. So not only meeting what the community demand is, that you have some buffer for those high volume days in the summer, for example. You have effective operation, which includes pressure management. So you want to prevent back siphonage of any potential risky chemicals from those connected to your water supply. So pressure management is one way to help address that. Maintaining chlorine residuals. So again, that disinfectant level all the way to the dead ends, or all the way to the ends of your distribution network. And you carry out flushing and cleaning programs where needed. So where there might be some stagnant water or seasonal flushing programs, just to make sure that the water quality can be maintained. And then leak detection and condition assessments. So you don't want to just treat your water to lose it in leaky pipes. So a lot of communities are aware of what their water loss, unaccounted for water loss numbers are, and then you take some steps to identify where are those areas where you may have system leaks. And these leaks can indicate some condition issues as well to address. And then effective maintenance. So when you have water main breaks, you have staff responding in a timely way to water main breaks as examples, and you carry out preventive maintenance as well to ensure infrastructure longevity and reliability of service. Infrastructure planning takes place through capital budgets and asset management plans. So in recent years, you might be familiar with asset management planning regulations, which 588 or Reg 588 talks about coordinating the priorities of road infrastructure with stormwater and sanitary with water. So you're not excavating the same roadways for different infrastructure needs only years apart. So you're coordinating those assets needs And also asset management planning is required for grant approvals. So grant applications require that your municipality has a formal asset management plan. And these asset priorities, are driven by treatment infrastructure age and conditions of your infrastructure, ages of water mains and appurtenances such as valves and hydrants, failures histories. So where in your community have you had a large number of water main breaks or deteriorating water quality issues? Your risk assessment outcomes are updated every single year and based on changing risks. And so if you're seeing new risks, that also factors into your capital planning processes. And condition assessments might be reports by engineers and other experts. And then you also have plans for large capital maintenance and replacement of infrastructure. Effective monitoring and reporting. You have regular sampling and monitoring programs based on regulatory requirements throughout the distribution system, the drinking water system. You also have critical control limit monitoring and response, so staff are all on the same page on what is a good number at various aspects of disinfection or various aspects of your distribution network. They're looking for a certain pressure level and better. They're looking for a certain disinfectant and better, and taking actions when those ideal numbers aren't met. And then operational sampling and testing programs, monitoring programs based on maybe changing conditions and you're seeing a trend in a certain way. Well, maybe you're taking some added steps to sample and monitor more than what the regulations require. There are incident response and notification requirements. So when you do see adverse water quality incidents, there's an expectation you immediately verbally report to the agencies such as local public health and the Ministry of Environment Spills Action Center, and to the owner if it's health related, and to the public, of course, if it's health related. There's an annual infrastructure meeting to discuss priorities and those changing risks. So within the utility itself, they'll discuss about these changing risks, and then perhaps some adjustments to your capital plans are made based on those changing risks. And then there are reports and communications about the monitoring programs and reporting on those. The Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks conducts inspections every single year. Every utility, every water system in Ontario is inspected every year by the Ministry, and your community is receiving consistently excellent inspection ratings. The manager, Mark, of Environmental Services would provide you results, and any Ministry recommendations and best practices noted in your reports are implemented through North Perth's continual improvement process. And you have license. So you have municipal drinking water licenses. They expire next March of 2025. It's every 5 years. Your licenses expire, and they're due for application 6 months before they expire. And before the application deadline, you have to have an updated financial plan. So that's one of the 5 parts of your municipal drinking water license, which includes the 5 parts there. Your drinking water permit. So going back to the license, the municipal drinking water license includes operating terms and conditions for your drinking water system. The drinking water works permit, which is the first bullet point under there, first part of the license, it describes the physical aspects of your drinking water system and the terms and conditions under which you can make physical changes to your system. And so different forms and different engineer sign-offs for different levels of changes. Permits to take water relate to your wells. So it's under the Ontario Water Resources Act, where you have permits to take water. Generally, they expire every 10 years, and you would have a number of them for your various water sources, and they have various expiry dates. Your operational plan is one of your 5 parts of your license, and it's updated annually every time you have an external auditor coming around, and it's endorsed by you, the owner, with each new council. The operational plan is describing how you have implemented the quality management system here. So while the Ministry, the Environment, Conservation and Parks has issued a drinking water quality management standard, well, the operational plan helps describe how you implement that standard here. And the accreditation program conducts audits every year, and you've maintained it to at least December 2023. And then the financial plan was last updated in 2017 and would be next due before the application deadline of September 2024 there. So the financial plan is to demonstrate sustainable water systems and that you have good financial plans in place to identify what those needs are for the future. Annually, you have quality management system activities, including infrastructure planning and budget processes. Every fall, these are carried out. Emergency response training and testing exercises every summer. This is carried out. Internal audits by your internal auditors, carry them out every spring. Your external audit, the accreditation auditors come along every winter. Ministry inspections, they're carried out throughout the year. Annual and summary reports by February 28th every year, and then management reviews are carried out every March every year. And then outcomes of management reviews are also reported to you. Ontario Reg 170.03 is about drinking water systems. That's the title of that regulation. Section 11 is about annual reports, and these are one of the reports you will be receiving about the quality performance of your drinking water system, which describes your system, your chemicals used, the summary of the most recent water test results, a summary of any adverse test results or other issues, including the corrective actions you took to correct them, description of major expenses incurred to install, repair, or replace required equipment, and the locations where your reports are available, which almost always is online at your website as well. And then Schedule 2 summary reports require a list of all the various compliance requirements, such as the Safe Drinking Water Act, the regulations under the Safe Drinking Water Act, your municipal drinking water license requirements, drinking water permits, and any orders by the ministry inspectors. For each of the requirements that weren't met, you're supposed to summarize the duration of the failure, and then what were the measures taken to correct those failures, and then a summary of the quantities of water produced, the flow rates of the water supply during the period, including monthly averages and maximum daily flows, as well as comparing that information to the rated capacity and flow rates for the system's approval and drinking water works permit and drinking water license. Risks to your systems and plans to address these. The risks relate to adverse drinking water quality, so related to disinfection requirements, either it's primary or secondary disinfection. And then another risk is low or reduced distribution system pressures, which then could introduce that backflow potential. It could introduce a backflow event if the pressures aren't maintained. Plans to address these is through increased sampling, monitoring, and testing, and through preventive maintenance programs, water main break response by certified operators, and a backflow prevention program. Emergency management, there are 3 levels of water emergency escalations. So starting from the bottom, you could have an alert or a major incident, such as a severe weather event, and the potential for loss of power as an example. And if you acknowledge that there could be a potential loss of power, well, you need your pumps to pump, even in a power outage, to supply water. So your staff would be verifying that backup generators will have the fuel supplies needed to make sure that you will still have power in a loss of power situation. All staff are fully engaged. Your emergency plan is activated. But the municipality's emergency plan would not be activated. If it's a water utility emergency, such as a water advisory, your municipal emergency control group would be activated. Your staff are fully engaged from the water utility and response activities, and then both emergency plans would be activated. The water services, utilities emergency plan, as well as the municipal emergency plan. And then perhaps you have a natural disaster, a tornado through your community. Well, then that's the municipal emergency control group is activated, and your emergency plan is activated, and the water utility may have an activated emergency or not, but it would still be very much involved in response actions, because in a municipal-wide emergency, probably you'd have all departments involved. Effective management, you have through customer service. So the water department staff respond to customer calls after hours. There's on-call coverage. There's water utility 24/7 staff coverage. There's always a same-day call response. Most issues are resolved over the phone. You have 85 consumers and keeping an eye on the system. So if there were any deviations from normal conditions, we'd hear about it. You have potential to expand on community outreach and education events, and you have a water meter replacement program in 2023 with advanced metering infrastructure, and more information and accuracy for the end customers will be provided. Key challenges always relate to source water protection measures to ensure that you will have that sustainable quality and quantity of existing supplies. Another challenge is chlorine residual maintenance. That's every water distribution system in the province. As well, you have a system vulnerability to backflow events for as long as your backflow prevention program is not at 100%, for example. Financial sustainability of systems, so every few years when your municipal drinking water license expires, you're to demonstrate through the financial plan, the updated financial plan, that you have sustainable water systems. You also have infrastructure sustainability and asset management. Changing customer expectations. Maybe you're seeing some members from other communities and a growing community, and then changing regulations with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks overseeing Safe Drinking Water Act and related regulations. So there is owner oversight for major policy areas and programs, such as the approval and reviews of financial plans, the approval and reviews of budgets, considering resources and staffing necessary. There's infrastructure and master planning, as well as asset management planning, emergency management, and customer service. And Justice O'Connor, who led the Walkerton Inquiry, this is a key statement from the report on the Walkerton Inquiry, and the purpose of quality management approach in the context of drinking water is to protect public health by achieving consistent good practice in managing and operating a water system. And the last slide is Mark's contact information for any questions, and at this time I will ask you if you have any questions for you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you very much. Let me just change the camera source here. All right, colleagues, any questions come up during this presentation that you would like to ask of our special guest or of Mr. Hackett? Councillor Andreessen, let me grab your microphone here. Go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Kiesenberg. Thank you very much for the presentation. I do have a question. It's related to a report that we received from the Ausable Bayfield Maitland Valley Source Protection Program. And in that report, they indicated that there needs to be drinking water training in areas that have vulnerable that could be vulnerable to the water being, problematic. So I just wondered if perhaps you could answer this, or perhaps Mr. Hackett, if we are required through that report to provide training to residents and landowners about protecting source water because of potential vulnerability in North Perth. If you're aware of that, I'm not sure. It was in a report that we received last week.
Mr. Hackett.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, I believe the source water protection people they do quite a lot of public outreach, and they've contacted anyone that's in those vulnerable areas and provide information packages and quite a bit of public education so that to protect the source water in those areas.
Secondary to that, if you don't mind, through you, Mayor Kiesenberg, in the report it stated that it's a new policy that requires us as a municipality to do that training. So I wasn't sure if that's something that we have to pick up or...
Yeah, I'll have to look into that a bit more, and if there is a requirement that the municipality would have to provide more of that information, we definitely would act on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks. Anyone else with a question at this point? Councillor Nordum.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you for the report. I'm just curious, how do you see where the water's coming from on the wellhead? Like we see the graphs here on 15. Like how can you see where that's coming from?
That's a good question. I sure don't know the answer to that. There are hydrogeologists that
Okay.
study that, and they would be able to provide all that information and all that mapping of. It's somewhat theoretical, but they put there's a lot of science behind it as well, and hydrogeologists are the ones that provide all that mapping.
I have a question about water supply for community growth and sort of our capacity at this point. The community, of course, has grown rapidly over the last 5 years. And, there's sort of chatter from time to time in the streets about whether we have enough water, amongst other things. So I'm curious to hear you comment on our current situation and our future needs.
I don't know the exact numbers because I don't have that information ahead of me or here right now. That's part of what we provide in the annual reports and in the summary reports that will be coming shortly. And typically, we're nowhere near the capacity of those well systems in any of the wells in North Perth. I don't recall the numbers. I think Atwood's at about 17%. Listowel, again, I think it's more in the low 20s percentage. So it's something that's always on the horizon, and the outlook to be able to plan ahead enough because you don't get a new well by snapping your fingers either. It takes, I think they're saying, between 3 to 5 years to get to go from the idea to the actual well being in production. So that's part of what we do regularly, and we are in the midst of a water service review for Atwood and for Listowel, and I'm not sure what the timeline on. I believe it will be finished this year, and that will give us some more guidance on what we need to do to make sure we have enough water in the future as well.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with questions? Councillor Johnston next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the report. And it's a little scary that all the regulations that really fall on us as the owners. And thank you, Mark, for all you and your crew do to keep all the water as good as what we do. A question on we do lots of testing. Is there any requirements on color of the water? I know we have some high iron water in Listowel, especially, I believe, and sometimes it gets a little brown or a little off color. Is there any requirements on color? I know we test for everything else, but
Yeah, there is a vast array of testing that occurs each week and throughout the year. One of the parameters, color, as you mentioned, is not one of the ones that we're required to test. Iron is typically caused from iron in the water, which, any well in this area, in southwestern Ontario, any municipal or private, would definitely have iron in their water. It is an aesthetic value, so it's what you look at, what you see, and it doesn't look pleasant. But there is no requirement in the province of Ontario to test for iron in the water.
thank you.
Okay, Councillor Duncan, it looks like you're about to raise your hand.
Yeah. Further to that, there was a bit of information there about iron sequestration. What do we do to do that?
So at each of our wells, in all of our systems, we add a product called sodium silicate, and it is to sequester iron. It sort of takes it out of solution. So that's something that we add, and we've been adding that for as long as I've been doing this, for 20 years plus. I think it was 21 in the presentation. So yeah, it's something that we do all the time, and it's something that's pretty standard in the water industry to add sodium silicate. So that's what iron sequestering is.
Do you see any seasonality around iron presentation in the water system, just out of curiosity?
Not necessarily. Because it's groundwater, it doesn't really change that much with the seasons by any means. However, most of the issues that we end up having with iron in the water is not so much that it's in the water, it's that it gets stirred up whenever there's water main flushing that we do to try to get rid of some of that iron that's built up. We do that on a semi-annual basis. That stirs things up. Every time a fire hydrant is used, it stirs things up. Every time a business does a fire alarm or fire system test, it stirs things up. Even our regular operational things, and someone mentioned there with all the growth in North Perth, when you're doing all these commissioning new water mains, you're opening and closing valves, and that can stir things up until it has a chance to settle back down, and it stirs the iron up, and then that's when you see some of those occurrences where you get a lot of water or iron coming into your system, into your home.
Anyone else with questions? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thank you very much, Mark and Bridget, for the presentation. And just further on the iron issue, because you were in the news, and I appreciate the fact that public education is a crucial part of this for all of our customers on the water systems. But I guess additional information can be, if it can be shared within our well systems, if we can continue to do that and help and support. As you say, I mean, it's a bit of an ebb and flow depending on these incidents or not necessarily incident management issues from time to time, whatever they are. I'm sure you have a process in place to notify the public so they're aware. But, you know, we've certainly seen the news articles lately, and certainly it's, yes, it's an aesthetic issue, but it's certainly not a very nice aesthetic issue when you're talking about those things. So I appreciate the work that you've done and all, as Councillor Johnson said, all your crew and staff behind that. It's just a matter that anything else that we can do to try to help and support our customers. So I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, we've been encouraging anyone that has any issues to get hold of us through the new customer request portal. I think that's important. It goes right into our work order system that way, and it's easy for us to track, and not only to track that we've received a complaint, but also it helps us locate where they are, and if we're getting, you know, in the future that they're all coming from one area, that's an indicator that we have an issue there and that we need to do more. The ones that we've received lately, we've been making appointments to visit those homes and to see if there's anything that we can do or where the problem is stemming from. Because it can be external in the distribution system, but it can also be within the internal plumbing of a home. And so we have some a frequently asked portion of our webpage at northperth.ca under the water that gives you some ideas on things you can do to try to rectify those situations. And also our first action when we do have complaints is to talk to give the person a call, and then a lot of times we're able to handle that over the phone. And then again, if we need to, then we would attend. We spoke briefly with the CAO today about maybe there is an opportunity, just like you mentioned there, to do some more public education about iron in the water, because although most of you here have lived here a long time and you know there's iron in the water here, not everybody does, and we have people moving from the city or wherever coming here that aren't used to the water here. They find they're not it's something different for them to see, and so there's a lot of public education that we could possibly do. This has kind of just unfolded where it's kind of come to the forefront in the last few days or the last week, so we're still kind of reacting to it.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think I see CAO Snell looking like he wants to weigh in here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to support Mark on that last comment. People moving from an alternative water source like the lake area water sources like we have along the London area or even along the GTA, they do not see water in their iron like we do. Any well in sort of this part of Ontario will see iron, and anybody who's kind of grown up on the farm or has a rural private well will be used to this sort of that same orange stain that happens from time to time in our toilets and our sinks. It's a sort of fact of life, but I think, as Mark said, we can maybe do more to educate people on what iron is, where it comes from naturally, and what things we can do as both homeowners and residents to at least alleviate the effects of it.
Thank you. And I'm glad that we sort of have surfaced that there has been an issue that has attracted some media attention over the last week. And I can certainly assure, as many of you have been involved in responding, that the staff is quite engaged at this point. Mr. Hackett. Yeah,
the only other thing I wanted to mention is we actually decided just this week then, as part of responding to this, to actually do, Councillor Johnson asked about the testing, that is it required, and it's not. We actually are going to do some testing in the distribution system, mainly to get a baseline of information, because I look back previously, and in the 20 years been here, we've never tested for iron. But we are going to, and just to get a baseline so that we're able to fully answer people when they have questions about it, and again, part of that public education.
Thank you. Anyone else with questions or comments at this point? All right, I'm not seeing any. We have a resolution. Do we not have a resolution? Nope, we don't have a resolution. Okay. I don't see a resolution. So I think that was an educational presentation of great significance. Thank you again for visiting with us. And we're glad that Mr. Hackett and team do their work with such finesse. All right, let's move forward then to item 5.6.2. Mr. Hackett's not able to escape quite yet. He's drawn our attention to a request from the president of the North Perth and District ATV Club regarding their annual roadside cleanup for 2023. And Mr. Hackett, you want to just give us the briefing on this one?
Sure, yeah. I was contacted by the president there of the North Perth District ATV Club, and last year they did a roadside cleanup in the rural area, and they were able to collect 154 pounds, or about 70 kilograms of waste from our roadsides and ditches, and they took that to the Alma landfill. This year they have it planned for Saturday, May 13th. This year, weather permitting, and they're requesting that the municipality show their support of this endeavor, this community event, by waiving the landfill tipping fees at the Alma landfill, similarly as we've done with the annual Maitland River cleanup that we do as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, any questions or comments? All right, we have a resolution. Right now, the resolution is time limited for this year. I don't know whether we want to think about a broader policy approach and say that as long as they do it, they are entitled to waive tipping fees. That seems reasonable to me, actually. I see lots of nodding heads here just to make it easy for ourselves. So let's see if I can on the fly fix this a little bit. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth support the North Perth and District ATV Club roadside cleanup by waiving the landfill tipping fees for garbage collected at each planned event. Does that seem reasonable? Okay, I see Councillor Rothwell nodding his head and putting his hand up. I assume that means moved. Councillor Blazek has seconded this. Thank you. Discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have the modified vote. And that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Hackett, for bringing that to our attention. And that allows us to move forward to items 5.7. We have no reports from the Manager of Operations tonight. Likewise, 5.8. Seems like a rare night that we don't have something coming out of 5.8, but we don't have anything here tonight. So that allows us to move on to agenda item number 6. For item 6.1, councillors, are there any reports you'd like to ask of staff or of our committees? Okay, I'm not seeing any indication of that. Let's move to item 7. There's no additional correspondence. In fact, there was no correspondence tonight for us to task ourselves with. Likewise, for item 8 on our agenda, we have new bylaws further to consider. That brings us to item 9. Are there any councillors wishing leave to give notice of motion this evening? I'm not seeing indication of that. Let's move to item 10 on our agenda. For item 10, are there any announcements that would be a benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth at this time? And I don't know if we have anyone connected remotely. It looks like no. So it's up to us if we have announcements. Councillor Andreessen, let me get your microphone here. Go ahead.
I just want to share with the public that we have 4 councillors or 3 councillors and our mayor are attending the Roma conference coming up this weekend. So we'll be there for approximately 2.5 days and doing lots of learning from colleagues across the province with other rural municipalities to make the best decisions to support our communities. So yeah, we're looking forward to going, and I think it's a good educational experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Andreessen. Anyone further? I could have sworn that I saw something about a local hockey team championship on the weekend. If anyone knows anything about that, Doug, do you know? I have heard briefly. Right, okay. Well, we'll have to track that down, but I think one of our Listowel teams won a significant championship. Thank you. Okay, so we're getting speculative. Yeah, thank you, Neil.
Yeah, I can jump in. It was the U13 Listowel Cyclones, the local league team, won the International Silver Stick in Niagara Falls, I believe it was. St. Catharines. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Yeah, they went undefeated in the tournament as well, actually, so it's great. And I'm hoping that now that we're all back in the chambers, we can celebrate some of our local sports teams again like we used to.
Very good. I look forward to seeing more of this. And as you say, Councillor Anstedt, we've had the occasion to bring in championship teams for recognition by council. So I hope that staff will take note of this particular win and compare it to policy. I suspect it represents opportunity. So thank you. Any other announcements at this time? That's how council collaborates. We figure things out amongst the information bits that we have. I like it. All right, that brings us to item 11. We have one matter to be considered in a closed session of council. I'm going to read the resolution that both explains and enables our action to enter closed session as follows: that this committee proceed in camera at 8:15 p.m. to address a matter related to the following: a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, George Street unopened road allowance in Atwood. Can I call for mover on this one? Councillor Johnston says yes. Councillor Richardson, you can be our seconder on this one. Any discussion or debate here? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And that means that this meeting is temporarily adjourned for a closed session. Those who are not invited to remain should exit the chamber. We should secure the doors, and we will change the microphone system so that it's not transmitting at this hour. There we go. That brings us to item 12 on our agenda. I can confirm that council did discuss a matter identified in our enabling resolution for a closed session meeting of council and did give staff direction pertaining to the matter. At this time, the matter will remain confidential for reasons that were stipulated in our enabling resolution. Council, as a mandated good practice, acts near the end of its meeting agenda to confirm all of its actions and business of its meeting through what is called the confirmatory bylaw. For item 13.1, I have a draft for a confirmatory bylaw as follows. Bylaw number 5-2023 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth be introduced, read and considered read for second and third time, and be finally passed. And that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for mover on this? Councillor Nordum, thank you, and Councillor Andreessen. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And councillors, that means we've completed the deliberations and taken action on the business that came before us tonight. It is thus appropriate for us to consider adjournment. I have a motion to that effect as follows. The council meeting adjourns at 8:34 p.m. to meet again for general council business on Monday, January 30th, 2023 at 7 p.m. Councillors recall that's because Roma intervenes next Monday. Moved by Councillor Blazek, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Our next regular council meeting is Monday, January 30th, 2023. Until that date, this meeting is adjourned.